Guy marrying a computer was a joke back in 1999, but as of today, well, not so much. In the modern day, when we have computers that try to talk to people as if they are people, Plankton's computer wife Karen seems like something not of science fiction anymore, but perhaps something that could actually exist. Or is she? Let's take a look at the history of Karen in SpongeBob, how she developed as a character, and answer the question on if she is, in fact, artificial intelligence. The first appearance of Karen was also the first appearance of Plankton in the episode Plankton. However, unlike Plankton, whose character and motivations had already been decided as of his debut episode, Karen isn't really much of a character at all in this season 1 episode. She only has 2 lines in the entire episode. Not only is Karen not established to be Plankton's wife in this episode, she isn't even established to be any sort of being that can make decisions on her own. She is nothing more than just a voice that describes data. Even with that in mind, she still delivers one of the most iconic lines of the episode.
Plankton, 1% evil, 99% hot gas.
Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the computer wife concept was not present from the very beginning of Plankton's conception as a character. The name Karen actually comes from the wife of Stephen Hillenburg, who is also named Karen, and she was even meant to voice the character, but apparently she was too nervous to record the lines. Understandable, Karen. Voicing characters can be difficult. Because of this, Jill Tolley, the real-life wife of SpongeBob voice actor Tom Kenny, ended up voicing the character, keeping the wife theme intact. This is also why the end credits of Plankton still refer to the character as Karen rather than computer voice. The idea of her being a fully fleshed out character with a name and relationship was always there, even if you don't really see much of it in this initial episode. In Karen's next appearance, Fun, she is shown for the first time as able to make decisions on her own, as it is her idea for Plankton to embrace friendship with SpongeBob in order to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula. And then later in the episode, when it seems that Plankton is genuinely forming a friendship with SpongeBob, she challenges Plankton to stay focused on stealing the formula. There is no reference to Karen being Plankton's wife in Fun, nor even a reference to her being named Karen, besides the end credits. If you think of her as his wife in the episode, you only think that because she is established to be his wife in later episodes. But if you were watching season 1 as it aired, she would seem like nothing more than a sci-fi computer assistant voice. Already, we can see a difference between Karen and LLMs as they exist today, since Karen actually challenges Plankton rather than just agreeing with him. It's pretty well known that currently AI chatbots will most of the time just agree with whatever someone tells it, and not offer too much meaningful challenge to the person's perspective. Karen in these scenes does none of that and argues with Plankton the same way a human being would. Now, while this means that Karen is not an LLM in the way we understand it to be currently, it doesn't necessarily mean that she isn't one at all. Perhaps Plankton designed Karen to specifically focus on stealing the Krabby Patty secret formula, which is why she disagrees with him when he does something that is contrary to that goal. Theoretically, an LLM could be programmed to do that. Of course, in later episodes, she doesn't always only advise Plankton to steal the Krabby Patty formula, so this is just not the case. But if you look only at Fun in a vacuum, it could be. Narratively, in this episode, Karen is supposed to represent the opposing side of Plankton's character dilemma. Plankton's choice in this episode is between having a friendship with SpongeBob or trying to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula. SpongeBob is the character who encourages Plankton to choose the good option, friendship, while Karen is the one who encourages Plankton to choose the bad option, being evil. In the end, because Plankton is the villain, the evil side wins out, teaching the lesson that he should have chose the opposite. Karen's next appearance is much like her appearance in the first Plankton episode. In Imitation Crabs, she voices the self-destruct warning after SpongeBob puts a penny in the self-destruct coin slot. While this doesn't progress Karen much as a character, it does further solidify her as the voice that represents Plankton's schemes and gets the audience more used to her presence. In Welcome to the Chum Bucket, Karen's other Season 2 appearance, Karen's role is similar to her role in Fun, where she advises Plankton how to best get SpongeBob to cook a Krabby Patty. However, unlike Fun, where she advises Plankton to do the more morally corrupt action, steal the formula, she instead advises him to be kind to SpongeBob, saying that he will only get what he wants from someone else if he approaches them with care and understanding. Now, this is still pretty consistent with Karen currently being portrayed as an unfeeling computer programmed to advise Plankton in all things formula stealing. However, there is something to Karen being the one to advise Plankton in this much more humanistic way that makes her seem so much more, well, human. Though, while thematically this action makes Karen feel more human, I wouldn't find it too unbelievable that an LLM would be able to give the basic advice of be nice to someone and you'll get what you want from them. So at this point, Karen's status as an AI is still inconclusive. The first time Plankton ever refers to Karen as his computer wife is actually in the episode The Algae is Always Greener, which isn't until season 3. I know, I was pretty surprised that it took this long for the show to confirm that. Looking at the previous 4 Karen appearances before this one just shows how much their dynamic changes the moment Plankton says those words, computer wife. They bicker and banter in this first scene just the way a married couple usually would, and they even make a joke on the domestic trope of the wife cooking dinner with the whole holographic meatloaf thing. Something interesting about this episode is that it also implies that Plankton did not build Karen with this whole
parents must have been like part computer or something
comment, which also humanizes Karen a bit as it implies she has parents. Now, as of now, it is pretty well established canon that Plankton did in fact build Karen, which leads me to take this moment, as well as the EMILP mother-in-law joke from Single Celled Anniversary, to be more so just little gags. So with Algae is Always Greener, Karen is now officially Plankton's computer wife, and this will forever change how Plankton works as a character. By having Plankton have a wife, it makes him a little more dimensional, as opposed if he was just a solitary villain. It gives him a confidant, someone he can talk to when we get his side of the story. And while Karen being just a regular computer assistant also accomplished that, her being his wife allows his scenes with her to be a little bit more emotionally vulnerable, whereas in episodes like Fun and Welcome to the Chum Bucket, they're a little bit more matter-of-fact. Like, if you look at the scene in Plankton's army where Plankton is all beaten up and Karen puts that little robot hand out that accidentally squashes him, the scene itself is just so tender and loving, despite it being between a single-celled organism and a computer. It all adds so much to their dynamic, and adds so much to the character of Plankton. It is around this time that Karen becomes so much more of a character, so much more humanized, but that still begs the question, is Karen actually real? Is there anything behind this computer screen that resembles a soul? Or is it always supposed to be that Karen is nothing more than a heap of ones and zeros designed to give Plankton a sense of companionship and help him steal burger recipes? While there is nothing in the show as of the first 3 seasons that confirm nor deny this, I will say that narratively, the episodes Algae is Always Greener and Plankton's Army rely on the fact that Karen is in fact a living, sentient being. Because if she wasn't, the emotional weight of these scenes straight up wouldn't matter. Story-wise, Karen absolutely cannot just be an unfeeling machine, because if she was, then the audience would have no reason to care about her and Plankton's relationship. Enemy-in-law is perhaps the lowest point in the entire Plankton-Karen relationship, as, well, it's pretty much the episode where he cheats on her. The narrative tries to sanitize this act of infidelity by having Plankton state that Karen isn't actually his wife and that wife is just an acronym, which is just funny and absurd enough to allow me to buy the narrative. However, what might be the most notable element of Enemy-in-Law is how Plankton just straight up presses Karen's off switch so that he can go date Mr. Krabs' mom. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that this episode isn't only the one where Plankton cheats on Karen, but it's also with Mr. Krabs' elderly mother. This is actually still a pretty good episode, to be honest, and all of these weird elements to it kind of play well into the uncomfortableness of the story. So anyway, back to the fact that Plankton literally clicks Karen's off switch in this episode. So this moment shows something that we don't usually see in the Plankton-Karen relationship, a power imbalance, with Plankton being the one with said power. And I think this whole he turned Karen off thing is really important in this discussion about AI, as this sort of power imbalance between man and machines is one of the reasons why a human/LLM romantic relationship will never be something that should be broadly accepted socially. And that reason is consent. Beyond the obvious statement of LLMs are not alive, so you can't have a relationship with them, there is also the fact that an LLM by design cannot reject you. Whereas in a real relationship between people, one can reject the other. The foundation of any relationship really is the idea of choice. If you're in a relationship, the person you are in a relationship with could reject you. They could say no to you. And because they could say no to you and they instead choose to say yes, that is what makes the relationship meaningful. Plankton literally having an off switch on his wife, while a funny joke, shifts that power dynamic. It has Karen be a computer who doesn't actually consent to the relationship, and instead is something that Plankton built to be with him no matter what. That is, that would be the case if not for the ending of the episode, where Mama Crab smacks Plankton so hard he flies into the on switch, and Karen delivers much-deserved comeuppance to Plankton. This ending shows that the writers understood that that would have been an inappropriate power dynamic, because it removes the power that Plankton took in the beginning. Even though he turned Karen off, she ended up back on anyway, and she punished him for it. Later episodes would then go out of their way to shift around this power dynamic to portray Karen as the one with power over Plankton. Like, for example, in the episode Krabby Road, where Karen literally throws Plankton out of the chum bucket because Plankton went to jail. Or in Computer Overload, where Karen straight up leaves Plankton, showing that she does in fact consent to their relationship in other episodes when she's with him. This is something that sets Karen completely apart from LLMs and AI as we know it. There is currently no AI chatbot around that can straight up reject you. If there was, well, I don't think they'd be very popular. So at this point in the show, Karen is pretty well established as being pretty much just a person who has the abilities of a computer. And really, that is the best of both worlds from a writing perspective. You get to have Karen lean into all of the evil scientist stuff that Plankton is known for, and you get to have Plankton be portrayed as a loner whose only friend is a computer, but also you get to have actual emotional moments between them, and times where you can feel for Karen as a character. I also would like to highlight how the show does an incredible job at making you empathize with Karen despite her being a computer. In a cartoon, facial expressions are everything. The greatest strength of the medium of animation is how much an animator can do to express emotion by drawing their characters' faces in a myriad of different ways. But Karen is a screen, so they have to be a little more creative when it comes to expressing her emotions. The most prominent characteristic of Karen is, of course, her little line thingy, which moves up and down as she talks. You'll notice in the earlier Karen episodes this line was more rounded, but eventually they solidified her to have this more rigid up and down motion, kind of reminiscent of a heartbeat, which makes her feel more human, despite the fact that canonically she does not, in fact, have a heart.
Doesn't this warm your heart, Karen?
I suppose it would if I had one.
But come on, we've all seen Wizard of Oz. We know the difference between a literal and metaphorical heart. There are also a couple other little deviations from the standard Karen line movements that help sell her character as well. Every so often, she'll use a sort of robot appendage, or her monitor on wheels that allows her to be a little bit more expressive. And every so often, when she really needs to express an emotion, they'll just have the computer screen straight up display a face. But really, what sells Karen as a character the most is her voice performance. Because the character by design just isn't as capable of expressing emotion visually, the vocal inflections really have to sell the character. And credit to Jill Talley for being up to that task.
You're not a real wife. You're just a computer.
In fact, I would say that the voice of Karen is the thing that is the least AI about her. And I think that's by design. I could see a character like this totally going in a different direction. In a lesser show, the character of a computer wife would have had a monotone, computer-like voice. But with Karen, they just straight up don't do that at all. Everything else about Karen is computer-like, but when she talks like a person would.
That'll help you get the formula.
Nowadays, people are making computers try a lot harder and harder to talk like people. But even the most advanced AI voices, ones that might even trick you or I in some situations, just lack a lot of human inflection. And there's truly no algorithm that will ever be able to do that. Karen's voice is the secret formula, no pun intended, of the character. The show presents you with a computer who is, by all intents and purposes, computer-like except in its voice. And that is how the character strikes a perfect balance between being robot and being alive. It's also notable that Plankton and Karen are actually the most consistent long-term relationship in the show. SpongeBob doesn't really like to muck around with relationships too much, and have been pretty strict with the platonic nature of SpongeBob and Sandy's friendship, so as to not muddy their comedy show with a drawn-out dramatic through line. Most of the time, when the show wants to tell a story revolving around a romantic relationship, Plankton and Karen are it. The first episode that I think really deeply engaged with Plankton and Karen romantically was Single-Celled Anniversary. It's not the funniest episode around, but I always found it to have a really nice emotional thread. At first, Plankton is only motivated to do something nice for Karen on their anniversary because she's holding the secret formula over his head. But throughout the story, you do start to see that Plankton genuinely has a lot of love for her. Beyond the Plankton-Karen relationship relationship, the writers have started to flesh out Karen more with episodes focused on the gal pals. It's a way for this show that's usually more focused on its male characters to have more female-centered stories. Karen, being a part of this gal pals group, does a lot to help flesh her out and set her apart from Plankton. As of right now, there are only a handful of gal pal episodes, as it's kind of a new concept for the show, but I hope to see more gal pal focused episodes moving forward. But here's the big kicker to the argument that Karen is in fact not AI. I've been talking a lot about how the story itself requires Karen to be a sentient being in order for the show to actually work. But I haven't yet provided any in-universe evidence, and that's because for most of the show's existence, there really wasn't any. You could, in all of the examples I talked about, look at Karen as nothing more than an unfeeling mass of wires that, due to science fiction suspension of disbelief, just happens to formulate certain responses. Sure, if you looked at it that way, it would completely diminish any episode where Karen is supposed to be someone the audience cares about emotionally, but still, you could look at it that way. Nothing in the show has ever disproved it. That is, until you look at the Plankton movie. So while the Plankton movie is called, well, the Plankton movie, I would argue that it's just as much the Karen movie, as the story of the Plankton movie revolves around deconstructing Plankton and Karen's relationship, and proving to the audience that the one thing that Plankton loves more than his beloved secret formula is in fact his computer wife. But the Plankton movie reveals something else about Karen's backstory that had not yet ever been previously a part of her character. According to the Plankton movie, Karen is actually a living organic being, a potato. In the flashback of Plankton first putting Karen together, her very first form is a potato-powered calculator. And even though she eventually became the more advanced machine we know today, the potato is still at her heart. Now, the question of whether or not in real life one could take a potato and with the right amount of wires and coding make it a being capable of having a loving relationship with a 2-inch tall plankton dude is one that I will leave to the scientists and the philosophers of the world. But what the narrative of the Plankton movie is communicating is quite clear. Karen is, deep down, a living thing. Now, I don't know the exact intention of the team behind the Plankton movie in regards to this creative decision, but I do think it is relevant to point out that the Plankton movie premiered in 2025, which is well into a world where LLMs and AI are, unfortunately, a part of our reality. I do think it's quite possible that this potato heart backstory for Karen is the writers going out of their way to try and confirm that Karen is in fact not an LLM, but something else entirely. Like in a pre-AI world, take me back, please. Writing a character that's a sentient computer that gives calculated responses would just be another sci-fi thing. But in a world where computers now do give calculated responses, even though those computers are not sentient, Karen as a character just feels different, you know? And this potato backstory, it helps. It says, no, Karen is still a science fiction thing. She's not like that app on your phone that's making you a stupid person. So, with all these pieces of textual evidence, we can conclude without a shadow of a doubt that Karen is indeed not a... What? What's that? My producer is saying I need to look at this clip from the episode Karen for Spot. Why is that?
A sophisticated AI like myself should have no problem with a simple organic being.
Well, there you have it, folks. You heard it straight from her mouth, or speakers. Karen is, in fact, artificial intelligence. But if you think about it, even if I concede that Karen is AI, you know what kind of isn't AI? AI. See, I really can't stand the term AI and how it's being thrown around so flippantly, because really, everything that is currently labeled as artificial intelligence is not intelligence at all. Yet, for some reason, these companies get to gallivant around using this science fiction word to describe their product. This attitude, commonly referred to by scholars as being wrong, is a phenomenon that is nothing new. Let me ask you, do you remember this thing? So this object was popular around the year 2015, and it was called a hoverboard, despite the fact that it neither hovers nor is a board. You see, 2015 is the year that Marty McFly time traveled to in the 1989 film Back to the Future Part 2. Because this is a science fiction movie making guesses about what they thought the future would look like, the narrative shows pieces of technology that didn't end up actually being invented when the real 2015 came to pass. Most notably, flying cars and hoverboards. Some would call this a simple missed prediction. But if you ask me, I don't think Back to the Future Part 2 was ever seriously trying to imply that something like flying cars or hoverboards would ever exist for public commercial use. And the real reason that such things exist in the movie is just so it can portray an exaggerated version of the future for the sake of having a more entertaining story. After all, I don't think anyone at any point in time has ever seriously believed that flying cars could ever be commercially available to the public, mostly because of the obvious logistical issue of the slightest accident would cause instant death. A hoverboard, on the other hand, feels a little more feasible. So when the arrow of time ticked closer and closer to the year 2015, the general public asked a simple question. Could we, have hoverboards? And basic physics replied, no. But the thing about people is that we sometimes have a way of not accepting when we can't have what we want. And one of our coping strategies that we use to further our proclivity for such denial is for us to lie to ourselves. And so we call this little dumb thing with wheels a hoverboard, and then a bunch of them caught on fire or something. Whenever I heard this thing called a hoverboard back in 2015, it irked me to no end. First of all, as a machine, this thing has basically no utility. It's not like a bicycle that can transport a person somewhere faster or a unicycle that can be used in performance art. For all intents and purposes, this thing exists just so it can be called a hoverboard and we can feel like we're living in some kind of sci-fi future that's better than the days of old. And because the only name for this thing is hoverboard, we are forced to deny the evidence of our eyes and ears and say that 2 + 2 = 5. AI is the exact same thing. An algorithm that does nothing more than take large swaths of data and regurgitate it in a way that mimics poorly something a human can do with no hint of real intelligence, artificial or otherwise, anywhere within it, is something that I and everyone else are forced to refer to as AI because that's just what it's called. So yeah, Karen is AI. But AI doesn't actually exist. It's a science fiction concept that has not yet, or possibly never can be, replicated in reality. And if it were possible to create such a thing, to create an artificial living thing, I would be against it. I think that the inherent power imbalance that we as humans would have over the artificial life would make it an inherent second-class citizen, not to mention that it would inevitably turn into Terminator and end all life on Earth. The truth is that if Karen were real, her creation would actually be the most evil thing that Plankton has ever done. But because SpongeBob is a TV show and Karen is just a clever sci-fi inspired character, I don't count her creation on Plankton's list of crimes. Especially because when the character of Karen was created, the moral discussion of sentient computers was only a theoretical one. As opposed to today, where, well, it's still theoretical since we haven't proven it's possible, but it's something that is more worth discussing, as it could possibly be a moral issue in the coming decades. So, if we look at the relationship between Plankton and Karen, it is important for us to understand that within the context of the show, their relationship is not different from that of two humans, as they are both sapient creatures who actively consent to being in a relationship with one another. While one can make jokes about Plankton being the first guy to marry an AI chatbot, I mean, I made a joke like that at the beginning of this video, we should know that that is not the lesson of the Plankton-Karen relationship. What Plankton and Karen are really about is a relationship between people who are themselves on the fringes of society. Plankton being so lonely he created Karen isn't relatable because someone can literally build themselves a spouse. You can't. It's relatable because Karen represents the one person who is still there for you, even when the rest of the world is against you. And that is why their relationship is special. For someone in real life who thinks they are in a relationship with an AI chatbot, there is nothing about Plankton and Karen's relationship that would be analogous to that. Karen challenges Plankton. Karen can offer her own unique perspective to Plankton. Karen can say no to Plankton. But the human mind can be quite finicky when it comes to denial. Like I said earlier about how we call things that are not hoverboards, hoverboards, and things that are not AI, AI, just because we want to feel like we're more advanced than we actually are, some people will jump through some hoops mentally to believe that their chatbot is something more than it actually is. It's kind of like Tom Hanks's character in Castaway talking to Wilson the volleyball as if it was a real person. There were no other people on the island, so the volleyball was the closest thing to people, even though it wasn't that at all. These AI chatbots are just like that. They're the closest thing to the thing that you actually want. But there's one major difference between you and Tom Hanks in Castaway. You are not stranded on an island. There are things that you can do that will nurture your ability to have actual human connections. And I know you can probably find some edge case of a person out there who truly has no other possible way of connecting with another person. But let's be honest here, that is almost certainly not you. But you know who wants you to think that an LLM is a worthy substitute for actual human interaction? The people who made it. A real relationship is something that people put a lot of time into. And for every person who instead puts that time into using whatever GPT, Grok, Gemini, whatever, that's more money into their pockets. Now, perhaps the reason why they want this is just to keep their companies in the green in an ever-changing economic landscape. If you ask me, I think they just hate you. And they hate life, and they like when misery festers. And while we never created flying cars and hoverboards and living robots, we have created technology that enables the worst people in the world to make all of our lives worse. And that is not something that beloved SpongeBob character Karen would ever take part in. She may enable her husband to steal the Krabby Patty formula in order to conquer the world, but she certainly ain't as evil as these barnacle heads and their dystopian technologies. So if you're really sick of AI, I have some good news for you. Over on the companion channel to this one, Jackson Fanelli Podcast, I've been putting out a lot of great segments from my live streams that break down how AI is affecting our current media landscape and how we can deal with it. You really ought to check it out. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider becoming a channel member or supporting my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.